report from our international editor, Jeremy. Welcome to Jeremy. This is the most significant escalation we've seen here in a long time.
And a moment of grave danger for Lebanon.
Yeah, in the last 10 days, Israel has scored some very significant victories, and killing Hassan Nasrallah is by far the biggest of them. He was the beating heart of Hezbollah. He made it into a formidable fighting organization. Now it's not beaten, it still has experienced fighters, it still has weapons. How the people who are there now after him decide to use those, what their mentor and their allies in Iran decide to do, and the way Israel decides to try to follow up the success it's had so far, all that shorter term could lead to a wider Middle East war. Longer term, it could even reshape the region.
Jeremy, thank you. We'll return to Jeremy in Jerusalem very soon. But Israel's bombardment of the Lebanese capital is continuing tonight. And you can see here some of the areas that have been hit over the last week. And officials here in Lebanon say now that nearly 800 people have been killed since Monday. And it was one of those attacks yesterday afternoon highlighted here in which Hassan Nasrallah was killed. Well, our senior international correspondent, Orla Guerin, is in Beirut.
Here in Beirut tonight, there is anxiety and tension. I can hear a drone over our heads. And many streets are deserted. Many people are worried about what may come in the next few days, what Hezbollah will do, what Iran will do, what Israel may choose to do next. Here in Lebanon, there will be 3 days of national mourning for Hassan Nasrallah, beginning on Monday, and flags will be at half-mast.
This is what Beirut has been enduring. Massive Israeli strikes that could ignite the whole region. Because Israel killed its target, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah. For his followers, it's a devastating blow. For his Iranian backers, a strategic loss. The long-time leader of Hezbollah was a long time in hiding. This was the moment in a New York hotel room on Friday when Benjamin Netanyahu approved the strike on his old enemy.
The state of Israel yesterday eliminated the master murderer Hassan Nasrallah. We settled accounts with the one responsible for the murder of countless Israelis and many citizens of other countries. Nasrallah was not another terrorist, he was the terrorist.
Israel claims this is a historic turning point. For many in Beirut, it's a time of fear. Plenty were fleeing the city today, clinging to the hope of finding safety somewhere. But there's danger in every direction in Lebanon. We travelled through Dahiyeh, the Hezbollah stronghold, now looking anything but. It's been bombed time after time.
This is just one of the locations that has been hit. There's smoke still rising here, there's ash in the air, and you can smell the explosives, and I can hear a drone now overhead. The strike here happened overnight, and since then there's been no let-up.
In Beirut's Martyrs Square, many slept in the open and remain there today, new homeless from the Middle East's newest war. The governor of Beirut, who has no connection with Hezbollah, fears for his city.
What do you think is the Israeli plan here? What are they trying to do?
I don't know, but Israel wants to kill and to kill and to kill. You cannot predict what Israel can do.
But you fear the worst?
May God protect this country.
It seems a very sad moment for you.
It's the saddest moment in my life. Thank you.
And a moment of grave danger for Lebanon and the Middle East. Israel says its work is not finished. No one can be sure what will come next. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Beirut.
Well, Hassan Nasrallah hasn't been seen in public for years because of fears of being assassinated by Israel. Our diplomatic correspondent Caroline Hawley has more on one of the best-known and most influential figures in the Middle East.
Hassan Nasrallah was the face of Hezbollah, a hugely influential figure in the shadowy world of Middle East militias. A hero and resistance fighter to many Lebanese Shia and others. To Israel, a terrorist leader. It was after the assassination of his predecessor in 1992 in another Israeli airstrike that Hassan Nasrallah became head of Hezbollah. With the backing of its main supporter Iran, he transformed it into one of the most powerful paramilitary groups in the Middle East, with huge political clout in Lebanon as well. Essentially a state within a state. Hassan Nasrallah led Hezbollah during the war with Israel back in 2006, when the group fought the IDF to a standstill. But last week, a crippling blow for Hezbollah, as thousands of pagers, then walkie-talkies used by the group, exploded simultaneously. Hassan Nasrallah knew he was a target, lived mostly underground, and didn't use electronic devices himself. His response to these extraordinary attacks was his very last speech.
We were subjected to a huge and severe blow, but this is the nature of war and of conflict.
Hezbollah has been badly weakened, but its arsenal of weapons still includes long-range missiles hidden underground. We don't yet know who, as Hassan Nasrallah's successor, will inherit them, and what direction they'll take the conflict in now. Caroline Hawley, BBC News.
Well, the big question here now is how countries in this region might respond to Nasrallah's killing. Our security correspondent Frank Gardner looks at what might happen next.
This assassination has taken the Middle East one step closer, potentially, to a much wider and even more damaging regional war. Now, it's not inevitable, but what happens next depends on several factors. Firstly, what will Hezbollah do next? Its command structure has been decapitated, its communications sabotaged, many of its weapons destroyed. But it's vowed to carry on fighting Israel, and its members are baying for revenge. It still has a large arsenal of missiles, many of which can reach Tel Aviv. There will be pressure within its ranks to use these soon before they get destroyed. But if they do in a mass attack, then Israel's response could wreak havoc on Lebanon or even on Iran. So what will Iran do? This assassination is as much of a blow to Iran as it is to Hezbollah. It's already announced 5 days of mourning, and rallies across the country have taken place. It's already taken precautions, hiding away its leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, in case he too is assassinated. Hardliners will also be pushing for a response to this latest humiliation by Israel. Iran has a whole galaxy of allied militias around the Middle East. As well as Hezbollah, they've got the Houthis in Yemen and armed groups in Syria and Iraq. Iran could ask these to step up their attacks on both Israel and US bases in the region. But whatever response Iran chooses, it will likely calibrate it to be just short of triggering a war it cannot win. And what will Israel do next? Well, the one thing it's not doing is pausing for a ceasefire. It reckons it's got Hezbollah on the back foot now, so it'll want to press on with its military campaign until the threat of those missiles is removed. Short of a Hezbollah surrender, and that's pretty unlikely, it's almost inevitable we could see this. Israeli ground troops going into Lebanon. They've been training for it this week. Their priority will be to find and destroy those remaining missiles, many of which are underground. Going in will be easy, but getting out could, like Gaza, take months.
Well, tonight, the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has spoken with the Lebanese Prime Minister, Najib Mikati, and the two have agreed on the need for an immediate ceasefire. President Biden has called Hassan Nasrallah's killing a measure of justice for his many victims and said that US efforts to try and de-escalate the conflict here in the Middle East would continue. Well, let's go live to Washington, D.C. and our North America correspondent, Tom Bateman. Tom, it seems so far those US efforts at de-escalation aren't working.
Well, the first point, Anna, is that President Biden has backed the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, as you were saying, especially because, as he said, of the killing and kidnapping by Hezbollah of Americans in the past. The question is, where does this leave his entire strategy for the last 11 months to stop the war in Gaza spilling over and engulfing the entire Middle East? And that is now the crucial question for the White House. Remember that over the last week, the Americans were leading a diplomatic charge at the UN in New York, trying to rein in the Israelis and Hezbollah, bring them back from the brink, try and get a truce between the two and get them talking. Now, we got Mr. Netanyahu's response to that thought in the fact, as Orla was saying earlier, that he authorized the strike on Hassan Nasrallah from American soil here in the US. Now, I think that leaves us asking the question, what next for Joe Biden's strategy? Because first of all, we have Mr. Netanyahu clearly signalling that he will do as he pleases, whatever the American pressure, safe in the knowledge that the flow of American weapons will continue. And finally, the point is this: the Americans are now back in crisis management mode when it comes to the wider region. We've had both the Pentagon and the State Department warning Iran-backed militias against attacks on American troops, and President Biden saying they are boosting what he calls the US defense posture in the region.
Thank you, Tom, in Washington. Let's return then to Jerusalem for a final thought from our international editor, Jeremy Bowen. Jeremy, what chances are there now of some kind of de-escalation here?
Low to non-existent. I could remember or identify where the region faced such a complex and dangerous series of crises, and frankly, I couldn't think of one. So I think now what's going to happen, as you've been hearing, is that there are important decisions to be made by all the participants in this. Those who are left in Hezbollah, and they still have formidable forces, experienced, armed, they have to decide how to use those weapons. Iran has to decide what to do next, not simply militarily, but because for years now it's relied on a network of allies, of which Hassan Nasrallah and Hezbollah were the most prominent, the so-called axis of resistance. Now, that strategy, relying on that, seems to have taken some massive blows, have a huge hole in it. Don't forget, Iran has advanced nuclear technology. Some Iran watchers are speculating that could this be the spur that makes Iran decide to try to develop a nuclear weapon? It is not inconceivable. And as for the Israelis, their objective, they've stated it, is to try to get their 60,000 citizens back to their homes on the borders. Killing Nasrallah on its own does not do that. They will have to do more. Could that extra thing be a ground invasion? And if that goes ahead, I'd say it's probably a more serious and testing military challenge for the Israelis than bombing Beirut.